Today, our speaker is Llew Howell, a retired university professor, a published author, and a member of our congregation. His most recent writings concern race relations and women's issues. He'll be speaking to us on religion as he sees it. I'd like you to welcome Llew.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you all for allowing me to come and chat with you this morning about religion, one of my other favorite topics. Is it on? I just need to get closer to it. Let me begin with a little story about my religious upbringing. I was born and raised in the Presbyterian Church. My mother was a Methodist before she married. Her family were all Methodists. I could never tell the difference between Methodists and Presbyterians. Maybe the Methodists had more church socials. And there was something about predestination for the Presbyterians. Still don't exactly know where that comes in. We went to church regularly, meaning that we only missed church on Sundays if we were away or if there was an illness in the family. In Sunday school, I learned all of the Bible stories and lessons of morality that Sunday school teachers conveyed, and I loved them. I learned that stealing and murder were bad, but that World War II was a good thing. Cheating and lying were wrong. Adultery was terrible, but I wasn't exactly sure what adultery was. It wasn't discussed at Sunday school, despite the fact that it's a commandment. Marriage was a good thing and divorce was a terrible thing. Catholics were not good people, but on Saturday we could cheer and should cheer for Notre Dame. A long list of good and bad that we ultimately had to memorize and apply in some way in our lives. Easter was an important holiday, something to do with Jesus rising from the dead, but more to do with Easter eggs, the Easter bunny, especially chocolate ones, and jelly beans in a basket, and springtime. On Easter, the sun came out, and we all felt better every year. I especially loved Christmas stories with an equal mixture of Jesus, Mary, Three Kings from Afar, Santa Claus, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and the film It's a Wonderful Life. I loved everything about Christmas. Christmas trees, snow, the only time that I love snow. Both giving and receiving presents. I found my dog Sparky underneath the Christmas tree when I was 4. And Christmas dinners. Somewhere in that mix was the role of Joseph, Jesus' stepfather. This turned out to be a somewhat troubling aspect of the acculturation process that occurs in religious training. When I learned the facts of life during my life on the farm and learned a little bit about science from my rural school, there was something nagging about the fact that Christians kept claiming that there was no biological father for Jesus. As a 12-year-old, this just didn't sit well with me. Also, when I was 12, my favorite and closest uncle died of a burst appendix. He was a Christian Scientist and had refused hospitalization. After he was forced into medical care, we followed reports daily on his condition. I prayed and I prayed. He's such a good person, God. Please save him. He died. This just didn't sit well with me. Also, when I was 12, I was confirmed into the Presbyterian Church. Reverend Hallen took each of us into his office where we were asked to agree that we would read the Bible every day. It was sort of a surprise question, but I said yes. I lied. I didn't even read the Bible that day, nor for months following. I kept wanting for God to strike me dead. Kept waiting for God to strike me dead, not one. But he didn't. So much for lying, I thought. And so started my disillusionment with religion. But I was already acculturated, a Presbyterian, Protestant, Christian for life. The church had done its work. I then muddled through those teenage years. I stopped going to church, except when occasionally my parents would coerce me into going. At the University of Michigan, I accidentally put together some courses on philosophy, logic, geology, and astronomy. The Earth definitely was more than 6,000 years old, I was convinced, when I dug a 1,000,000 years old trilobite out of the side of an old riverbed in Ohio. Eternity could exist in time, both backward and forward, I learned. Infinity could run left and right forever, and in circles, in math and in space. It was here in an astronomy class that I began to think more about religion specifically. An especially good year for this thinking was 1964, when I was 24 and living among Muslims in rural Malaysia. The village that I lived in had no electricity and thus no lights at night or TV. I could actually see the stars and the universes beyond. I could lay in the dark and think about things. I shared a small house with the school's Islam teacher, who sang prayers 5 times a day. What was all that about? Who were these Buddhists who lived in the nearby village? And those Hindus with their ornate temples and incense that wafted through the rubber plantations and hung in the air? And those headless Japanese ghosts that lived down the road? I began putting together in my mind something that I have come to call purpose analysis. Purpose analysis is a method that I use for understanding organizations, institutions, and human behavior by looking for its purpose. I began to look at religion and ask, amidst all its contradictory and conflicting beliefs and practices, what was its purpose? First, there are premises to any systematic analysis. We could begin with, I think, therefore I am. But this is just a sermon and not a treatise or a set of volumes. So I'll get to the absolutely necessary basics. The critical one in the case of religion is that clearly there are many religions and just as many institutions through which they are maintained. I only needed to listen through the wall of my Malaysian house to realize not only the diversity, but the depth of difference. Not only are there many, but they come and go. Their formation and their demise have always been in the minds of men and women. Mostly men. Religions are created by human beings, and when they are created, each has a purpose. And while the specific nature of one religion varies from another, purposes can be identified that are in common. In categorizing purpose in religion, I begin, of course, with Christianity. But in working my way outward through every other religion that I have encountered, and there have been many, just named a few above, I find that there are purposes in common in every one. Any method of analysis has to be kept simple for it to work, and I have kept this as simple as possible. I find that there are 3 ordered categories of purpose, and I have named them exactly that way: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Let me say a few words about each one and leave them for you to think about, or perhaps we can discuss them later. In keeping with the Christianity framework, I'm going to use the 10 Commandments as illustrations of each type of purpose. The primary purpose, as I have come to see it, of religion is to create an institution that prevents any widespread destruction of the beings that make up the immediate society and any systematic implementation of practices that will wreak havoc in its organization. So in Judeo-Christianity, we first have, you must not murder. As a general principle, this prevents any society from physically destroying itself. In this same primary category is the second rule, you must not steal. This also stimulates economic growth. Accompanying this is the principle represented in the 10th commandment, you must not covet your neighbor's house, or wife, or servant, or ox, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. Stealing and murdering would, of course, result in societal chaos and anarchy. So, the first purpose of religion is to preserve human society and live to see another day. The secondary purpose of religion has to do with the control of women, both for reproduction and the continuance of society, and to satisfy male biological demands for sex. Built into the reproductive aspect of this purpose is the necessity to be able to trace hereditary origins. And built into this is the need to determine who will take care of you when you are old. The commandments that relate to this purpose are, you must not commit adultery, and you must not covet your neighbor's wife. Noting that there was nothing mentioned about coveting your neighbor's husband, for either males or females. Related directly to the notion of inheritance and social service for the elderly is the commandment, honor your father and mother. In this case, sociologically, this translates as care for them when they are otherwise unable to care for themselves. So there's a social services aspect of the commandments. On the quantity of sex for men, there's enough here for many books, and there are some, but I'm not going to go over them all right now. The wording of the commandments, though, translates in this: more money and power equals more sex and variety of partners for some men. And it translates across every religion the same way. Other men have to do without the sex. Because if one man has 4 wives, 3 men have no wives. Others have to do without and go to war instead, where women are among the prizes. Today, just like it was 1,000 years ago. Several things should be noted in looking at secondary purposes. One is that for virtually every religion, even when females are worshipped, men are in charge. It is not coincidental that men are stronger and are the originators of the religions. A second is to note that this hierarchy and sense of possession has deep roots in all of civil society as well as in religious society. Look at how deeply ingrained it is in the freest and most democratic of Western societies, France, the United States, and the Scandinavian countries. A tertiary purpose of religion has to do with political structures. This is the implanting of societal organization in order to maintain the implementation of both the primary and the secondary purposes. This is societal governance and its structures. It is also the establishment of religion as the single ruling party. Religions are inherently authoritarian. You must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind that would distract from me. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God, me. And remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Celebrate me, God. Separately, and those are 4 commandments if you didn't recognize them without my commentaries. Separately, and maybe we can call this the first law after the establishment of hierarchy of governance itself, is you must not testify falsely against your neighbor. This tertiary purpose, if it appropriately characterizes a goal of religion, means that the civil state and any religion are competitors. Indeed, before the rise of the civil state in the 15th century, religion and state were one. Even today, in the most advanced civil state, religions compete with civil government to make the rules by which society is directed. Just for example, think about what we have been hearing in recent political discussions and arguments about the 10 Commandments themselves. Should they be hanging on our courthouse walls? Should they be presented to all students in our public schools? Should congressional sessions be opened with a prayer? And think about the issues related to the establishment of Islamic states. Iran is the primary example, within Islam at least, of the religious and civil states having been re-merged. Are we moving in this direction again in the West as well? Or in China? For the purposes of this discussion, I would count Confucianism as a religion as well, and its basic rules of organization are largely coincident with the objective of the Han Chinese state. Now, I describe so-called communist China as actually a Confucianist capitalist state. Where's communism? It's not there anyplace anymore. And there are arguments going on as we meet about whether there is an Israeli civil state or just a Jewish state. There are many vestigial remains of the religious state. Is the Vatican a church or a country? Ronald Reagan thought it could be both and made it so. The Queen of England is still the head of the Anglican Church. Unless we forget the largest country in the world, there have been a number of recent articles about the convergence of Vladimir Putin's Russian government and the Russian Orthodox Church. There are many derivative purposes of an established religion. We think of the charity work that is beyond the organizational and financial capacity of a civil state. In the U.S., church groups often provide funerals for the indigent, including bringing along a few mourners. In Malaysia and China, places I'm familiar with, such funerals are often provided by triads, that is, by the local criminal gangs. Religion provides community, a place to go where everybody knows my name. They provide an establishment and renewal of faith, a sense of order, explanations for the complexities of human and natural existence, and more. In some cases, perhaps too much more. Are we stepping back in human history to a time of less sophisticated and less democratic organizational thinking in the name of religion? And if we are, will we step back too on that secondary purpose of maintaining the simple biological dominance of men over women? I hope not. But I have to say that I'm facing some momentary skepticism. In Tuesday's election, we will be facing some monumental and historical decisions about where human society, not just American society, will go. How will history turn out? It's up to every one of us to help steer our society, however small it may be, in a direction that is both civil, that is with a small c meaning participatory, and civil with a capital C meaning honoring thy neighbor, the commandment that was left out. Thank you.
Please stand now as you're willing and able, and join in the singing of number 134, Our World is One World. Please join me now in reading of the West Valley Unitarian Universalist Church's mission statement. This church provides a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for our lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. We thank Llew for sharing his reflections with us today. And I'd like to thank all of you for sharing this bit of your morning with us, and again invite you to stay for a light lunch.
So we thought you were soothed enough, so I'm going to come back and talk to you some more. The Unitarians ought to be able to tolerate that. I brought some show and tell today if we did have time. I didn't put it in a little bit earlier, but let me talk to you about these things a little bit right now. This is the Bible that I swore on that I would read the Bible every day, and then didn't. But I still have it, and I do read it from time to time. I keep several things by my bed. I have this Bible. The second Bible that I had is The Prophet by Mikhail Gibran. And thinking back into the 60s, you can understand where that might come from. And I worked my way forward. I keep by my bed The Teaching of Buddha and a copy of the Holy Quran translated by a Pakistani. So it's in Pakistani English with side by side with the Arabic, which I can't read. And then I have the Atheist's Bible that helps me translate this one. And then lastly, something that you might actually want to go and get if you haven't ever read this yourself. This is a novel. It's called The Source by James Michener, written in 1965, the same time that I was going through this thinking about what religion was and where it came from. And it says essentially the same thing. I didn't discover this book until maybe 5 years ago or so it's recent to me. But once I started reading this, I kept looking back and asking myself, did I write this? No, I didn't, but I should have. I wish I had. But it's a wonderful way to look at the story of religion and where religion comes from and what it can contribute on its best side, on its best day. But it also explains and reflects on what it contributes in the way of war and mistreatment of women and the poor and everything else that has come in the name of religion around the world. And it's all of Michener's books. It's well written, it's engaging, and it's very close, I think, to being history. I'm learning to be a novelist and a short story writer. And I took a course on memoir writing a couple of months ago. And this course was taught by a woman named Cheryl Strayed, who you may have recognized because she wrote a book called Wild that was on the top of the bestseller list for 8 or 10 weeks. It's a really quite engaging book too, about her trip up the Pacific Crest Trail by herself, hiking 1,100 miles. And she taught this course at Esalen out in California. And then in the course, she said that any memoir that you read, like hers, it is determined on the law of averages to be 82% true, and the rest is made up. These are the averages. And so it's not all. Any memoir, any history isn't all true. They've researched things, they've gotten things, but especially if you do like in her book, she wrote it 10 years after the fact and put in conversations. And it's not at all clear that she remembered that conversation. Where did it come from? But then she said another interesting thing is that the same author who investigated the writing of memoirs and found them to be 82% true took a look at fiction, typical fiction, and determined that on average they're 82% true. And so it is with the source. Maybe there's some things in there that don't quite fit with what you know about history, but I think that you'll find it gives you a very stimulating and quite accurate guide to the history of religion. It's an excellent book. Does anyone have any comments that they wanted to make about what I had to say, or rebuttal or questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question. in your opinion, overall, throughout the history that we've been here, when you put religion on a scale, has it been a primary positive force or a negative force? Which balance goes toward positive and negative?
Well, history isn't done yet, so it's kind of hard
you
to
have done that.
tell. Yeah, it's very hard to say because every aspect of human development is affected by our belief systems and by the institutions. Even more than the beliefs themselves, it's the institutions that are formed around them, the power of churches and the money they have. The financing by the Catholic Church of the exploration of the unknown world at that time had an enormous impact on human development. Enormous. During the course of which hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered. So, what is the balance there? I don't think I can come to a quick judgment. I'd have to get a calculator. It's something. But it's pretty even. I wouldn't say that you can say that churches are a good thing, nor that religion is a good thing. It is for some, and it hasn't been for others. And I think it'll continue that way. Yes.
Why is it in Western religions it's almost built around the fear of the afterlife, that there is one fear of death, whereas Eastern religions celebrate it?
Well, it's a different way of, I think, of going at it. It's true that in Western religions there's a fear of death because there's a fear of hell afterwards, not a fear of heaven for most people. Some people would fear that it's going to be a little bit boring. But it's the fear of hell because that was the punishment that was determined that would inhibit people from doing things wrong. Instead of being, when they didn't have police or they didn't have imprisonment or anything else, what we did as human beings was use this possibility of burning forever. There's a forever there, but not anywhere else. Burning forever if you do something wrong, like lie. You would go there. There's all kinds of temporal punishments that we've devised as well, down to the cutting off of hands and all kinds of other things. But it's easier to reach the vast numbers of people with the threat of hell than it is with the threat of catching you and cutting off your hand. And so that, again, every religion, even the Eastern religions, have some fear that's built into an afterlife. It may not be hell, but it's coming back as a roach and having to spend your life as a roach instead of moving on to a higher stage of life afterwards. So there is a threat that's built in there as well.
So happy to sacrifice themselves for religious reasons.
Well, that's of course, you're talking about Muslims here, not just Tibetans. Muslims much more readily are willing to commit suicide because they think they're going to this heaven with this 72 virgins. Think about that in terms of the women's role that I talked about here today. That's tempting. It's a good thing for men. You don't find very many women who are sacrificing their lives for these causes, just the men, because they get those things. But I don't think it's that different in the Eastern religions than it is in the Western religions. There's still punishment for bad behavior after death. Yes?
It's not a fair question. Without defining terms, what percentage of men do you think want to be good?
want to be good?
Are good, want to be.
You're talking about just men and not women?
All men and women.
Men and women. They want to be good?
You have to put a number, what pops into your head?
Yeah. No, 80%.
80%?
Yeah, more, maybe. Most people actually want to do good things and lead the calm life, and
20%
that's,
do a lot of damage.
they do. They do. 1% can do a lot of damage. You may have heard this number bandied about 1%. Okay, well, thank you all for staying a few minutes extra. Next conversation. Which one? Oh, this one, sure.